Gross.
As a lot of you guys will know by now, that Anthony Joshua is set to defend his IBO, IBF, WBO and Super WBA World Heavyweight Unified titles against Russians Alexander Povetkin. Now, Alexander Povetkin has, for me, the best resume in heavyweight right now. And this is what we're going to go through. I'm going to give you all a bit of a bio for those who don't really know too much about Povetkin. So, of course, a lot of people who support Anthony Joshua, they just support Joshua, don't look at too much else outside there, and then of course learn about some heavyweights as they go along, as and when Anthony Joshua fights them. Nothing wrong with that, that's absolutely fine, and so of course that's what I'm going to help you guys with, to know who it is that Anthony Joshua is going to be fighting next. Now, Alexander Povetkin is currently 38 years old, so yes, he's actually younger than Luis Ortiz, and apparently he beat Luis Ortiz in the amateurs. I can't verify that for a fact, but this is what I've heard from multiple people, so I have every reason to believe that it's true. He's not the biggest heavyweight in the world, he's 6'2", but Anthony Joshua, he prefers the taller guys. So of course, when you fight Dominic Brazil, Charles Martin, Vladimir Klitschko, he finds them a bit easier to hit than he does with the shorter guys like Carlos Takam, Joseph Parker, even though these guys are all big, of course, like compared to the average guy, I suppose, and Alexander Povetkin at 6'2". So for me, this is going to be a very, very difficult, hard, long night for Anthony Joshua. This is just my opinion, of course. Now, with Alexander Povetkin, as I said, he's 6'2", 38 years old, born in Russia. In fact, he was born in Kursk in Russian, SFSR, which was, of course, at the time, part of the Soviet Union. His current record is 35 wins with only 1 defeat, which was, of course, against Vladimir Klitschko, which we'll get onto that one in a second. Now, originally, he was a world champion kickboxer, and he turned from kickboxing after winning multiple tournaments to boxing in the year 2000, and he was winning local tournaments already, and he won his first tournament at the age of 21 in Russia for boxing, and then went on to the world stage, European stage, all that kind of thing. And in 2002 he won the European Championships at super heavyweight, and 2003 in Bangkok, he won the World Championships. 2004, he won the European Championships again. And then in the same year, 2004, he done what every amateur would love to do as a boxer, is win Olympic gold over in Athens. So he became an Olympic champion at a very young age, of course. 1 year later, he decided to turn pro. He had a bit of deliberating about it, but he did ultimately turn pro. And he had a few knockover wins, I suppose, a few guys to get used to the pro ranks, but he stepped up pretty quickly. He really did. And of course, his first big step up was in 2007 when he took on a very, very decent Chris Bird. Now, Chris Bird at the time, I mean, he was pretty much a journeyman at that point, no doubt about it, but he was 40 wins and 3 losses at that point. But Chris Bird, for those who don't know too much about him, again, he had a very decent resume himself leading up to the Povetkin fight. He'd already beaten Vitaly Klitschko, where Vitaly Klitschko had to quit on his stool because he broke his hand or he hurt his hand or something like that. I'm going by memory, of course, but either way, he has a win over Vitaly Klitschko. He has other wins as well over David Tua, of course, from New Zealand, very, very stellar fighter. He's beaten Evander Holyfield, he's beaten Fraser Quendo, Andrew Golota. He has been in the ring twice with Vladimir Klitschko and lost both of them. But against Povetkin, he got knocked out in the 11th round. So this was the coming of age for Alexander Povetkin. This is when people really started to take notice of who Alexander Povetkin is. And straight after then, he went after an undefeated guy. So in only his 15th fight, in Eddie Chambers. Now, Eddie Chambers, I'm not going to say he's one of the best around or anything like that, because he is predominantly, you could probably argue, a cruiserweight, right? But Eddie Chambers has, as I said, he was 30-0 at the time. And on his record, he'd already been in there with the likes of Vladimir Klitschko. And up until he lost to Povetkin, where he actually lost on points to Povetkin, he had been in there with a couple of guys who at the time were considered semi-decent in the likes of Derek Rossi and Dominic Gwynn, of course. So Alexander Povetkin, in only his 15th fight, then gets 2 decent names on his resume, no doubt about it. And then he went on a bit of a run of in-betweener fights, I suppose. And then in his 21st fight, he took on a very decent guy in Nikolai Further. Again, you guys will know, I know quite a bit about Nikolai Further, but his toughest fight up to this point, in only his 22nd fight, was of course against Ruslan Chagayev. And this was for the vacant WBA regular title. And it's currently the title that Manuel Charr has right now. And very, very good fight, no doubt about it. Ruslan Chagayev was, or is even, I suppose, a very, very decent fighter. At the time, he went into the ring with 27 wins, 1 loss and 1 draw. Now, Chagayev, again, big reputation, of course, and his only loss was against Vladimir Klitschko. As a lot of the people around this time, their one and only loss was against Vladimir Klitschko. But, he had beaten the likes of Travis Walker and Nikolai Valuev as well, who David Haye beat for his title. He beat Matt Skelton and a few others. And Alexander Povetkin, he done very, very well against Chagayev, and he won by unanimous decision. And this was over in Germany. So, of course, he becomes a WBA regular world champion. He then defends it against Cedric Boswell, who, again, a decent fight. And this was over in Finland, in Helsinki even. And Cedric Boswell, he had a record of 35 wins with only 1 defeat. And then he went up against Marco Huck. Again, very, very decent fighter, predominantly a cruiserweight, of course, but Marco Huck went in there with 34 wins and only 1 loss. And again, this was over in Germany. So again, as you can see, he's going through the gears, Povetkin, and getting some pretty decent names on the resume. Marco Huck is still a very good fighter even now. Straight after Marco Huck, he went up against Hasim Rahman. You all know Hasim Rahman. He was a journeyman at the time, of course. It was in 2012. Hasim Rahman went in there with a record of 50 wins, 7 losses and 2 defeats. Rahman, of course, former world champion, defeating the likes of Lennox Lewis and all others. So again, it's another decent name on the resume. And then straight after then, he fought Poland's Andrzej Wawrzyk. Now, Andrzej Wawrzyk, you may not know him, but he was actually supposed to be fighting Deontay Wilder. This was Deontay Wilder's choice of opponent, fighting Wawrzyk. But Alexander Povetkin was the first guy to beat Andrzej Wawrzyk, where he beat him in only the 3rd round. He knocked him out. After knocking down Wawrzyk in round number 2, and of course round number 3, ultimately stopped. So again, he was the first person to beat Andrzej Wawrzyk. Then after then, he got his big moment against one other than Vladimir Klitschko. Now, again, this is only his 27th fight, Alexander Povetkin. And against Vladimir Klitschko, a lot of people were actually picking Povetkin to win this one. It was very, very dodgy, this one, for Vladimir Klitschko. He did have to go over to Russia, no doubt. And Klitschko used his size and his reach advantage. Every time they got close, Povetkin would have Vladimir Klitschko's weight on top of his shoulders, pulling him down. He would get elbows to the jaw. And well, Klitschko was very lucky not to get disqualified from this fight. He would grab him in an arm lock, throw him around the ring, and all kinds of other things. But either way, this was Alexander's first and, as of today, only defeat, where he lost on points to Vladimir Klitschko. Then after then, he bounced back and he beat Manuel Charr, who is a current WBA regular champion, right? And Manuel Charr is a very, very decent fighter. He gave Vitaly Klitschko a very good run for his money. And he's been in there with some stellar opposition, no doubt about it. But Manuel Charr, he gets knocked out by Alexander Povetkin. Now, I believe this may have been Manuel Charr's first loss. I'm not too sure. Sorry, I'm lying. No, it was actually his 2nd loss. So, again, another decent name on the resume of Alexander Povetkin. Straight after then, he didn't just take on a journeyman. He fought none other than Carlos Takam in a very good fight. This fight went 10 rounds, and Alexander Povetkin was the first person to actually stop Carlos Takam. In fact, as of today, you could argue probably the only one legitimately. You could say Joshua did stop Takam, of course, but some people say the referee stepped in too early. Even Joshua says that the referee stepped in too early. But either way, he knocks out Carlos Takam in 10 rounds only. So, you know what? Again, another very, very good name on the resume. Straight after then, he beat Mike Perez. A lot of people know Mike Perez, of course. Mike Perez, is a very decent fighter. Again, he fluctuates between cruiserweight and heavyweight, no doubt about it. Mike Perez had only had one defeat out of his 21 fights, or 22 fights even, because he won 21 of those fights as well. And Alexander Povetkin stops him in the first round. Beast mode, you could say. Straight after then, Mariusz Wach. Now, Mariusz Wach was, or is even, very, very durable. Like a Mariusz Wach, he's done well against Vladimir Klitschko. You know, he went the distance and took an absolute beating. And again, Mariusz Wach, this was the only defeat that he had was against Vladimir Klitschko. And Alexander Povetkin knocked him out in the final and 12th round as well. So he's actually the first person to actually stop Mariusz Wach. Straight after then, he went in there with Johan Duhaupas. Now, with Johan Duhaupas, it was supposed to have been Bermane Stiverne at that point, and before then, Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder would have been his WBC title shot, and Deontay Wilder, he had to go to Russia. He lost the purse bid, even though allegedly he's got 50 million to give Joshua. I'm sure he does. But he was supposed to have fought Deontay Wilder, and he failed a PED test. As it turned out, he was within the legal limit, so this fight should have went ahead. He should have got his world title shot against Deontay Wilder. Hence the reason why he never got suspended. Hence the reason why now Alexander Povetkin has in fact countersued against Deontay Wilder for smearing his name as a drugs cheat, which he wasn't. He did have something in his system. Let's not say he didn't, but it was within the legal limit, so he should have fought Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder ran away. He ducked Alexander Povetkin. He didn't want to go to Russia, and he was scared of Povetkin. Don't blame him, to be honest. But either way, that's what happened. Then he was supposed to fight Bermane Stiverne. Now, Bermane Stiverne was, again, he shouldn't have really been in the position, but as a kind of bonus or sub-punishment, I suppose, for Povetkin, he had to fight Bermane Stiverne for the mandatory spot again. And then he failed the PED test again. So this one was a legitimate fail. The one against Deontay Wilder was not. So Bermane Stiverne, he pulls out the day before they're supposed to fight. They even have the weigh-in and everything. And he gets replaced by Johan Duhaupas. Johan Duhaupas at the time, 34 wins, 3 losses. For the Frenchman, very durable, very good fighter, and he gave Deontay Wilder hell. But Alexander Povetkin knocked him out in 6 rounds. So again, he's still on top form, very, very dangerous. Then he has a bit of time off. He gets suspended, of course, because of this whole Bermane Stiverne failing of the PED situation. But then of course, he comes back against a kind of decent Andre Rudenko. Andre Rudenko come in at 31 wins and only 2 defeats. And he beat him on points. And a lot of people are starting to say, is Povetkin starting to slow down now? Maybe because now he's not doing PEDs, or he's being extra careful what he takes, or this kind of thing, starting to slow him down. Maybe it's a mix of age, who knows? But either way, he goes the distance with Rudenko, where a lot of people would have picked Povetkin to blast him out. And maybe a couple of years prior to that, he would have done. But who knows? Who knows? And this was for the vacant WBA and WBO international and continental heavyweight titles. In other words, to make him #1 contender for WBO and WBA. So, of course, he wins this one, so he gets ranked highly WBA, WBO. Then straight after then, against Christian Hammer, he then becomes the official mandatory for both WBO and WBA, where he beats Christian Hammer on points over 12 rounds, dominates him quite comfortably. Christian Hammer was running around a bit, so it did make it difficult for Povetkin. But either way, Christian Hammer, he went in there, the Romanian, he went in there with 22 wins, 4 losses. And one of his wins was, of course, against David Price. A lot of you guys will remember that one. It was a pretty decent fight up until Christian Hammer stopped David Price. But Povetkin, he dominates him, becomes the official mandatory. But then kind of, for whatever reason, I think maybe he had to choose which one, and I think he chose WBA, but then remained #1 for WBO. But he's in fact the WBA mandatory. Hence the reason why the Joshua fight's happening now. Now, he could have just waited around, waited for his title shot, but no, he decided to go in there on the Joshua and Joseph Parker unification undercard against David Price. David Price went in there with 22 wins and 4 losses. Of course, 2 of those losses were against Tony Thompson, where one of these, I believe, Tony Thompson was on PEDs. Another one was against Erkan Tepe, where he failed PED, but then he legitimately lost to Christian Hammer, where he did actually knock down Christian Hammer, but then Christian Hammer got up, David Price got all tired out and then got caught and stopped. So the referee put a stop to that one. But either way, Alexander Povetkin takes on David Price, and this is actually his final fight up until now, when he's going to take on Anthony Joshua, and he beats David Price. He drops him early on in the fight in round number 3, and Povetkin gets a legitimate knockdown or a 10-8 round against him, I suppose, also in the 3rd round. So this round number 3, even though David Price got dropped, it was an equal round because David Price hit Povetkin. Povetkin went stumbling back into the corner of the ring. You could argue that the rope saved him, but the referee called it a knockdown and obviously gave him a standing 8 count. Again, Povetkin didn't look too good in this fight, I have to be honest. He was rugged and he was quite durable, but he seemed a little bit vulnerable, maybe a little bit wary of David Price's shot. But he was confident in the fact that he knew once he hit David Price, then it could well be game over. And that's what happened in round number 5. He caught David Price with a great right hook, which smoked David Price to his boots. And then he followed up with a huge left hook, which put down David Price out cold. Now, of course, this was at the Principality Stadium. So this was Alexander Povetkin's debut on British soil. So all those who support Joshua and what have you got to see, if you watch the undercard, you got to see Alexander Povetkin. I'm not going to say that was at his best. As I said, you can only look back at some of the fights against like Mariusz Wach and Carlos Takam and many others to see what it is that Povetkin is about when he's on his A game. But he's now been waiting. He had the opportunity to fight Dillian Whyte, but decided, look, you know what, I want my title shot. And that's exactly what he's got right now after Deontay Wilder ducked and refused to sign a contract that he previously agreed to. The contract was on Wilder's desk for the best part of a week. So Joshua against Wilder for undisputed didn't happen. So yeah, yet again, as part of the record for Deontay Wilder, he ducks both of Anthony Joshua and Alexander Povetkin. People don't like to hear that, but that's the facts of it and that's the truth of it. So now we're looking at Anthony Joshua going up against Alexander Povetkin in a quality fight. It is a decent, dangerous fight for both guys. So whichever fighter you support, you're going to be nervous that your guy could legitimately lose this fight. If both guys are on form, it's a tough fight to call. It really is. I mean, you have to give the... You'll probably say that Joshua is going to be the favourite. He's a bit faster with his hands. He's probably a little bit faster with his feet, but he's not as skillful as Povetkin. Povetkin has had way more fights, been in there on big nights himself, so he's no stranger to any of this. So him performing, whether it be at the Principality, Wembley, Old Trafford, or wherever it may be, is not going to faze Alexander Povetkin, like it may have done with previous opponents for Joshua. But this is a very dangerous fight. Very, very dangerous. Povetkin, his record is, as I said, absolutely stellar. As I said, with a lot of these fighters that I've just reeled off there, a lot of you guys will know who they are. If you haven't, now you do. And his record now is at 34 wins without only one defeat against Vladimir Klitschko, which, as I said, Vladimir Klitschko threw him around like a ragdoll in that fight illegally, with forearm shots, leaning all over his back, all that kind of stuff. But out of his 34 wins, he has stopped 24 opponents. And yes, he is enrolled in VADA for anybody who is a little bit dubious about it all. But of course, he has to be. This isn't a request from Joshua. It's a mandatory where if you're challenging for the WBA title, if you are WBA champion, you must be enrolled by VADA. So both fighters will be tested. It's a decent fight. It's a quality fight. I'm looking forward to it. I am nervous for Joshua, of course. And if you're a Alexander Povetkin or Sasha Povetkin, as some people call him, then again, you're going to be equally nervous. For me, I think if Joshua beats Povetkin, I think Povetkin may well retire after then. If not, why not him go up against Luis Ortiz? That would be a great fight. But we'll have to wait and see really what happens. But anyway, drop your thoughts below. What do you think of Alexander Povetkin and his resume? Do you agree with me that he has the best resume of all the current heavyweights today? Drop your thoughts below. Click that thumbs up. Subscribe. Catch you all on the next video.